Hello everybody, this is TechHut. In this video, what we're going to be doing is installing Linux on this M1 MacBook Air. Now we're going to be doing this in a virtual environment because at the moment, actually installing it on bare metal isn't really working all that well. Unless if you have a Mac Mini and that has much better support than the laptops. But I do promise when these laptops can run Linux on bare metal, there will be videos coming out. So do make sure you are subscribed and ring that bell so you do not miss those videos. With that said, we're going to be using a virtualization software called UTM. Now, recently Parallels has given people the availability to do this on an M1 MacBook, but Parallels is expensive. You could do it through a trial account if you'd like to, but I really do think UTM at the moment is a wonderful option. It's completely free, it's completely open source. You can purchase it for $10 through the Mac store. And the benefits doing that is you get those automated updates and you are supporting the project. So this right here is their main website. You see we can securely run operating systems on your Mac. You can either download it or go to the Mac store if you want to support them. If I scroll down here, it says Windows Linux meets Apple Silicon. This software employs Apple's Hypervisor visualization framework, so that way the ARM64 operating systems that we can go ahead and use will basically run at native speed because it unlocks the processor as if the operating system that's being virtualized through the software is just natively using that CPU. So as far as performance goes, it should be a wonderful experience. If I scroll down here, you can see it was designed for Mac OS. And actually being in the software, it really was. It completely follows the concepts and theming, schemes, and everything that you'd expect out of a Mac OS system. And the actual setup process is very similar to something like VirtualBox, but overall it's just kind of set up a little bit better. So this right here is the software, and you can see it's beautiful. I've been testing out a couple different things in it. And if I go over to Browse UTM Gallery, this is all the systems and distributions and operating systems that at the moment they've confirmed to work perfectly fine on this system. And we can see we have a lot of different options. We have Arch Linux, a couple different Debians. We have ReactOS, Ubuntu, and older 14.04, but we also have 20.04, which is what we're going to be installing in this video. Additionally, you could run the ARM version of Windows 10, and then we have the x64 version of Windows 7 and Windows XP. So before we actually get into the installation of this, I'm still on my quest to actually pay for this thing. So I'd like to thank our sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions of people come together to take the next step in their creative journey. They offer thousands of classes including illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and much more. I've been using Skillshare a lot recently to improve the quality of my content. If you take a look at something I recorded a year ago compared to today, there is a huge difference. Now, Skillshare is for just about everybody, whether if you're a beginner, pro, the dabblers, or if you are a master in your art who is looking to refine their skills. I recently finished up the course by MKBHD and it was overall magnificent. And from there, I've been jumping into a lot of different DaVinci Resolve content since I've started using that video editor a lot more. And Skillshare has been my go-to resource in this regard. Also, the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a free month of Skillshare. So make sure you check out that link down below to get your free month so you can see what I've been talking about. And once more, thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video. So with all that said, now what we're going to do is get into the actual installation. So here I am on UTM, and what we're going to be doing is installing this Ubuntu instance. Now, I will note you are going to want to go ahead and download the Ubuntu server for ARM. That is what it's going to be using. But do not worry, we are not going to be just installing a server. We're going to be installing a GUI and all that fun stuff. So we're going to go create a new virtual machine. And I'm just going to go ahead and name this Ubuntu. Now from right here, you could go ahead, kind of like with VirtualBox, you could give it a style. So we're going to go with operating system, and we're going to go ahead and select this Ubuntu icon. From there, we're going to want to go over to system. We're going to give it a little bit more RAM because half a gig is not enough. Generally, you want to go with half of what you have on your system. So for me, it's going to be 4 gigabytes. Right here under architecture, we're actually going to want to change that to ARM64. And now from here, we're going to go over to drives and add a new drive. This is going to be our main disk we installed this on. Let's go with NVMe. I'm going to give this 20 gigabytes, and let's go ahead and create that. Now we need the drive that we're going to go ahead and import or input our ISO on. So we're going to go new drive. We're going to mark this as removable, and it's going to automatically set that to USB. Go ahead and click on create, and we are good to go. So we're going to save that, and here is our Ubuntu. Before anything, we're going to click on it real quick, and down here under CD, DVD, right now it's empty. We're going to go ahead and select that ISO that we downloaded. So let's browse. We have it right here. Open. And now with the live server here, we're going to go ahead and just hit this little play button to start up our virtual instance. So when you first boot up, you should see GNU Grub. We're going to go ahead and install the Ubuntu server. And last time I did this, it took quite a while to get into the first boot, so you may have to wait a couple minutes before you actually see the installation prompts. Alright, so now we're in our installation here, and I'm not going to exactly talk about everything that I'm doing, because I covered the Ubuntu server installation in a different video, but most of the stuff we could just go ahead and hit done, done, done. This is where we're going to actually select the disk. We only have a 1, so it should automatically be selected. So go done, done, continue, and now we're going to go ahead and create our user profile here real quick. Alright, when you have it all filled out, go ahead and go done. For this, I'm actually going to install the OpenSSH server just in case if I want it later. Here, I don't need any of this. This is all server stuff, so I'm going to hit the tab button and then go done. And now it is installing, so we will be right back when it is done. Alright, and when it's all done, you should have an option to reboot now, so we're going to go ahead and select that. And then it's going to take us into this screen. From here, we're going to want to go ahead and unmount that ISO. So click this little disk icon, go under CD DVD and just hit eject. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and restart our system. Right here, this little backwards play button is what's going to do it. So go ahead and hit that, continue, and it's going to go ahead and reboot into Ubuntu. All right, we have our Ubuntu login. Let's go ahead and just type in our username and our password, and then we are in. You shouldn't really have any updates. It should have done that during the installation, but you can always check. You just type in sudo apt update, type in your password, and then it's going to run through and check to see if there's any. And now we can see that all of our packages are up to date. So what we're going to do is go ahead and do sudo apt install, and we're going to do task.sel, and this is going to be how we install the Ubuntu desktop. So go ahead and hit Y to confirm our action. Now from here, we're going to want to type sudo task.sel install, and then that Ubuntu-desktop. Go ahead and hit enter, and then it's going to bring up this screen where it's going to go ahead and download all of the packages that we're going to need. Now this right here is actually a common problem. You can see it still says retrieving file, and it says the apt-get has failed. What we're going to do is simply rerun the command, and it should continue right where we left off. And you see it did. It's retrieving that last file, and it's going to begin installing all the packages that we need. Alright, and when that process is done, we're going to want to go ahead and reboot our system. You can tell it's done when we see our username and server name on the bottom. So let's just do a sudo restart. My bad, I'm an idiot. It's sudo reboot. Enter, and then it's going to reboot your system. And now when it reboots, it should be a little bit quicker, especially compared to when we booted into the live disk image. Alright, so now what we're going to do is go ahead and log into this and basically install the virtual drivers. Now through UTM, these are actually called the Spice Guest Agent tools, but they're fairly comparable to what you'd expect out of something like the VirtualBox drivers. So we're in our system, and this is technically our first boot with the actual Ubuntu desktop, so it's going to run through this real quick. Just go ahead and select everything you normally would, and now we're going to go ahead and open up our terminal before we get running around and get too excited about this. And what we're going to do is a sudo apt install of those guest additions, so we're going to do spice-v agent as well as spice-web davd. Go ahead and hit enter, type in your password, and it should bring up those packages and install with no problem at all. So now what we're actually going to go ahead and do is let's go ahead and power this down. So let's just do power off, power off, and power off. And then from here we could go ahead and close this window, and we're going to want to right click on our virtual machine here, go under edit, and here we're going to enable some options to actually use those drivers we just installed. So first things first, under, I believe it's sharing, we're going to make sure that clipboard sharing is enabled, but we're actually going to enable active or enable directory sharing. And then we're going to go over to display here, and we're going to enable the retina mode as well as fit to screen. So hit save. And now we're going to reboot into our Ubuntu installation. So let's go ahead and log in here. And what we're going to be able to do now when it actually completely boots in is we're going to go over here to view up in the global menu and enter full screen mode. So now, after it all resets, we have a full screen Ubuntu experience on this M1 MacBook Air. And overall, it's a fairly good experience. You can see if I go ahead and bring my cursor up here, I have all that. If I bring it down here, I could go ahead and access this Mac OS dock right here, so then I can interact with my host system fairly easily. Now, one thing, if I go ahead and open this up, you can see the animations aren't quite there yet, but that's really the only issue that I've noticed so far. Let's go ahead and open up HTOP to see some of these system usage. Looks like our CPU at a high point was at 10% while opening up this terminal, but the CPU basically isn't doing much of anything at the moment. And we can see our default RAM utilization is at 774 megabytes out of the 4 gigs we went ahead and gave the system. Let's go ahead and load our terminal back open over here, install NeoFetch. Now one thing, this works with the touch gestures out of the box. I'm currently using the trackpad to go up and down between this. So let's go ahead and open up our terminal. And I know for sure it doesn't include NeoFetch out of the gate, so we're going to do a sudo apt install NeoFetch, type in your password, confirm that, and it should take no time at all. There we go. So let's run NeoFetch, and you can see we are running the Ubuntu version, and the host is the virtual machine, running the 5.4 kernel. And you can see down here it can read all 8 cores of this M1 CPU, and it's using the Red Hat GPU virtualization. So we know this thing works. It's an absolutely wonderful experience virtualized on this M1 MacBook, but let's throw a little bit more at it to see what it can actually handle. So unfortunately, because this is on ARM architecture, the only benchmark that I could really use to accurately compare these two systems is Geekbench. Geekbench recently released a preview build for their Geekbench 5 that works on Linux ARM, so that is awesome. And when running this benchmark on both Mac OS on hardware and in Ubuntu through virtualization on the Mac, the differences were actually a lot closer than I was expecting. Single core performance only had a difference of 6.4%, with Mac OS taking the lead at 1741 versus Ubuntu's 1633, and the gap for multi-core performance was about double that at 12.1%, with Mac OS scoring 7674 compared to Ubuntu's 6796. Now with this said, if you click the link in the description, you could actually see more details on these scores, and you'll see that Ubuntu actually won in some categories, specifically beating out Mac OS in both single and multi-core performance with the HDR test, and beating out Mac OS on the single core with structure in motion. So overall, it's a fairly good experience. I've definitely been enjoying myself playing around with this, and I do look forward as things get updated, software gets written, and people really get around the M1 MacBooks or ARM processors overall. It's going to be really exciting to see what other manufacturers release into the market, because the more companies that do this, the more support it's going to get for Linux, because overall these processors aren't technically as powerful, but just how they work is phenomenal. The battery performance on this laptop has been great. I think I charged it like 3 days ago and I'm at like 20% now, so it's been a wonderful experience. With all that said, all the links will be in the description if you're interested in checking anything out. I would like to thank our YouTube members and Patreon supporters. We have Mitchell Valentino, Phil Mack, Timo, Anthony, and Kyle. Thank you guys so much. You are some of the top tier Patreon supporters. I really do appreciate your support. And thank you to all the other Techie and Techie Plus members. Also, Skillshare, thank you for helping me somewhat afford this MacBook. If you're interested, again, the link will be down below. With all that said, have a beautiful day and goodbye.